Thank you. Mr. Chairperson, esteemed participants to the conference, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank, first of all, the organizers of this forum for their kind invitation and for the possibility offered to me to take part in your discussions, which I know are held traditionally in this format at a very high political and professional level. I admit that in Russia, especially within the professional community of counter-terrorist experts, we have followed previous editions of the conference closely and with a lot of interest, and I have a strong feeling that Russia will seek even more actively the chance to come here again next time and to continue exchange of views on important issues with such a remarkable audience. I hope that I and the other Russian colleague from the Ministry of Defense, who also flew from Moscow to join you, and who will speak a bit later, I hope that we will contribute in an appropriate and useful way to the success of our collective work here. Just a couple of words about myself. I'm Deputy Director of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Department on New Challenges and Threats, which since July 2001 deals with the diplomatic aspects of Russia's participation in the international cooperation in the field of countering terrorism and certain other related global threats, which are extremism, narcotics, corruption, sea piracy, but mostly counter-terrorism. I do not think that anyone in this room would argue with me if I say that terrorism is not just a global threat today, but that it is growing. That is very important. Growing despite active and more systemic efforts, counter-terrorism measures taken at international and national levels. Terrorism is becoming more dangerous, more aggressive, and more effective. I will indicate just the most evident signs of this highly worrying international trend. All of these signs are well known to you, I have no doubt. First of all, in the recent years, international terrorism has obtained new and unprecedented deadly qualities. It has shown that it is capable to gain large territories, establish a quasi-state regime on these territories. It has also shown that it is strong and knowledgeable militarily enough to conduct full-scale and prolonged military campaigns, real wars against professional armies, even against several of such armies. Terrorist leaders and their ideologues continue to increase their almost universal ideological activities. They continue to improve their propaganda and recruiting skills, including through the most effective use of information technologies, but also possibly through the use of some other technologies which permit to manipulate hearts and minds of the large masses of people and of concrete individuals, transforming them into the so-called lone wolves of terrorism. And we know now that sudden and extreme radicalization of individuals, especially those without any personal history of radicalism or crime, has already become a very powerful terrorist weapon nowadays, and this weapon can be used practically anywhere and at any time. Such individuals radicalized to terrorism can become suicide bombers or use cars or kitchen knives or axes against civilians in the street in any city. But they also can think eventually about using some more sophisticated and dangerous tools and equipment, chemical, biological, nuclear even. And no law enforcement or special service would be there in time to stop them. Today's global terrorism is unprecedentedly aggressive, and it never seeks compromises. It never makes deals, even with the elders or seniors of their own religion, tribe, or community, or with the other radicals who choose less aggressive tactics. The modern global terrorism is extremely murderous, and it always wants to show it, to make out of the mass murders it commits a demonstration, a show. And these appalling and monstrous demonstrations amazingly do their propaganda and recruiting job. They contribute to the popularity of terrorists. They do not work against them, like it would have been the case a couple of decades ago, even 10 years ago. Another very important aspect of the modern global terrorism is that it infiltrates and uses for its criminal and subversive purposes any conflict, internal or international, practically any significant social, economic, religious, or ideological injustice. And injustices, we have them, plenty of them in our not-so-ideal world. Terrorists succeed in these operations and provocations because they are very active, as I said, and skillful in the information space. And they know how to sell the most simplistic solutions to the people who really suffer and who are often ready to trust whoever promises fast and clear result, justice, in brackets, of course. We all know that this is the way towards further exacerbation of any of these conflicts or injustices. What I have just said, how I have described modern global terrorism, and I have not enumerated all the facets of the terrorist scourge, should ideally be enough to make us all states and all societies come together and act together against terrorism and win in the fight against terrorism, because terrorists and the radicals were always and are today just a small portion of our societies. And we, good people, normal people, peace-loving people, are the absolute majority, and we are stronger and we are better in any possible way. And what is also very important, we know theoretically what to do and how to proceed in our fight against terrorism, in our collective effort. The UN has already worked out all the necessary plans, strategies, and decisions related to counterterrorism, and continue to do so every day. 19 universal conventions and protocols on various aspects of the fight against terrorism. Probably I should add to this list the draft Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, the draft launched by India long time ago, but it's still on the table, and it has a lot of brilliant ideas which are to be concluded and finalized. Also, we have the unique global counterterrorism strategy of 2006, a Bible of collective counterterrorism. More than 50 UN Security Council resolutions, excellent documents, including those adopted under obligatory Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. They deal with the most topical matters of the international anti-terrorist cooperation: curbing terrorist propaganda, banning weapons for terrorists, protecting civil aviation, suppressing the activities of the foreign terrorist fighters, including FTF's returnees. All these documents and decisions create a formidable foundation for effective and swift and real counterterrorism partnership, for a true worldwide coalition or a unified front against terrorism, as Mr. Putin, our president, Russian president, suggested in the General Assembly of the UN in 2015. If just 1/3, maybe less, of these UN decisions were implemented, there would not be any global terrorism in the world at all. Terrorist activities would have been reduced long ago to sporadic and less frequent occasions for individual country level or even local community level police-led operations. Instead, we have what we have: a huge monster I have described at the beginning, a highly dangerous and continuously mutating, unpredictable and always murderous threat for everyone, for every country and for every citizen of this country, of any country. So then the question is, what went wrong and what goes wrong with us united to combat terrorism? For Russia, the answer to this question is quite clear. Some of the terrorist leaders in the past and probably now were and are people of extraordinary capabilities, organizational, military, financial, criminal, or others. But on their own, without some amount of support provided in the right moment by, let me say, outside allies, including states, state structures, maybe indirectly, or in the form of turning blind eye on some specific developments related to terrorism and threatening some other country and not your country. On their own, without this support, terrorists wouldn't be ever capable of anything even remotely close to what ISIL was doing in 2013, 2015 in Iraq or Syria, for example. It seems that since the very beginning of the era of the modern global terrorism, all the people say that this era started in 2001, but although Russia met the most embattled squads of this then new category of terrorists 10 years earlier than that, in the 1990s in the Northern Caucasus. But from the very start of this era of the modern global terrorism, a rather important group of countries, including those who play the leading roles in the world affairs, the Western countries, have never put in their political agenda counterterrorism cooperation above their other political and geopolitical priorities. On the contrary, in Chechnya, and before that in Afghanistan, and after that in the Middle East, it seems that our Western partners were and are prepared to play or to deal with terrorists, to use terrorists to destabilize or to dismantle regimes considered rogue or authoritarian or dictatorial. The names can be different. The essence is the same. This dealing with terrorists is a very dangerous game which always ends badly sooner or later. The most obvious example is the catastrophic developments in Iraq after 2003, in Libya in 2011, and later and now in Syria. Geopolitically and to a certain extent ideologically motivated interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states, the use of terrorists and extremists to overthrow legitimate governments, to destroy traditional systems of security, creates chaos in which radicals and their sponsors seek to gain political as well as economic benefits. But these benefits are nothing compared to the suffering of the people of the destroyed country or of the destabilized entire region. More, these benefits mean nothing compared to the damage it all causes to the anti-terrorist security of the world community, including the Western countries themselves. That is why global terrorism grows now, and no one can say today what it will be tomorrow, what will be its dimension or priority targets or means to act, to use in their terrorist activities. It is high time we reconsider policies and start implementing the UN decisions for real, extraditing or prosecuting all the terrorists, extraditing or prosecuting, stop terrorist propaganda through probably rather dramatic and strong measures in the media space, information space, maybe measures close to censorship. Stop using double standards and dividing terrorists into different categories, bad ones and not so bad ones. Now it's very popular to call them violent extremism. Launch a concept of preventing violent extremism or countering violent extremism, which is dangerous. Terrorists should be terrorists. I would like to conclude with a specific comment. We are hearing a lot these days at international forums about the plans and practices of preventing and countering violent extremism, PVE, CVE. Russia remains very skeptical about this concept since its launch at the Washington summit in February 2015. We still do not have a definition of violent extremism. Please be careful when you use this notion. It is just a rather vague description. Our academics insist that violent extremism is just terrorism. Or on the other hand, there is pure and simple extremism, often not related to violence, but always dangerous to states and societies and people, because extremism, even not violent, means aggression against legitimate authorities and fundamental systems of a state or society, including traditions, religions, values, way of life. Together with our like-minded countries, we have put all these formulations we believe in dealing with extremism in our new treaty, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Convention on Countering Extremism, signed in June of last year by the heads of state and government of all 6 SCO member countries. With India and Pakistan joining the SCO, I hope the convention will gain support and authority, will be implemented much more widely and effectively. The treaty is open for non-SCO countries, and in any case, it could be an example of how to deal with the issue of extremism. Returning to the concept of CVE-PVE, in the key documents of the concept, we think we see a monumental mistake. It is not stipulated clearly and specially that states and their competent structures play the primary role in any work to counter extremism, internally or within the framework of international cooperation. Some of the elements of the concept, on the contrary, suppose that international best practices may be introduced in a sovereign country through direct contacts of some international civil society with local communities or local civil society institutions without proper clearance on the part of the government. We see this as a potentially another scenario of interference into the internal affairs of sovereign state, which, given the delicate character of the issues of terrorism and extremism, can become a serious factor of destabilization and provoke a rise of extremism. I would conclude here. Thank you very much.